Hello, everyone. Thanks for being with us this afternoon, and welcome to IU 13's Accelerated Learning webinar series. Today's topic will be summarizing with note-taking. We will begin with a short presentation combined with some practice opportunities and followed by about a 15-minute question and answer session. All right, go ahead. Today, this training will be brought to you by myself. My name is Kristen Lentz. I am a special education consultant on our training and consultation team, along with my colleague, Gail Campbell.
Good afternoon.
The two of us work on literacy on the training and consultation team. Next. This session is a part of a series that Lancaster Lebanon and IU 13 has been facilitating to provide responsive, high quality, focused professional learning experiences that highlight practical and actionable strategies for accelerated learning. The topics and content within this virtual professional learning series were developed as a result of feedback and supports requested by IU 13 members and evolving research and data on pandemic recovery, the Pennsylvania Department of Education guidance, and statewide PAIU network expertise. Next. So the accelerated learning has 4 components: high quality academics, supportive learning environments, healthy systems conditions, and system of scaffold supports. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at the system of scaffolded supports, which is a component that provides a continuum of evidence-based academic, behavioral, social, and emotional supports aligned with student needs. Next. As participants, you will be able to apply the steps of this high yield strategy of summarizing during some practice activities with short informational text and literature passages. We have created a series of materials for you. Gail is going to actually take us to the participants manual. You will find, and she will be placing a link to those materials in the chat. We'll take a look to show you what's in that folder as well. So in this folder, you will find our cue card for summarizing informational text, a cue card for summarizing literature text, a copy of the PowerPoint, and then several T-charts that we will be going over throughout our session this afternoon. So you'll find samples that you can use and as you move forward. Anything else you want to add about what's in the content?
No, I think we'll cover it again at the end in
the
the question and answer. We can look in there again, so that's fine. Okay.
For any other information about IU 13's Accelerated Learning website, you can access our website. There will be additional topics that are added to the calendar throughout the year. Next. Please make sure that to receive your Act 48 credits for this live virtual session, you need to do 2 things. First of all, please put your first and last name as well as your school district into the chat if you have not done so already. Second, please complete the Act 48 evaluation and the frontline professional growth. And you will be doing that at the end of this session. Next. We've used a number of different references in the creation of this content this afternoon. So this is a list of various references that we have used. In addition, if you're looking for further information about the accelerated learning resources, please see PDE's accelerated learning resource website. Not only will you find the system of supports, you will find an accelerated learning toolkit, additional webinar series recordings, and resources. And Gail has put that link in the folder as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into the content area that we're going to talk about this afternoon, which is going to be summarizing with note taking. Please know that if you have any questions about this content or information, you're welcome to reach out to either Gail or I for additional information or support.
And we are both on the training and consultation team. So there's always follow-up consultation available after a training.
First of all, we want to think about what exactly is a strategy and how do we teach a strategy? So a strategy is any kind of approach, the way we approach a task. But we always want to make sure that we are teaching that approach very explicitly. I'm sure a number of you have heard of the example, the I do, we do, you do example of providing instruction. And that is this model that we're going to be using today. We're going to be using an advanced organizer, and we'll be modeling it. We're going to be providing guided practice, but I also want to point out that giving feedback is a very important component of this. So while providing guided practice, we also provide feedback to the students. While providing independent practice, you're going to continue to provide that feedback to the students. And then finally, we'll look at the post organizer or closure. Oops. I think we went the wrong way somehow.
Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Okay, now we're in business.
So when we're talking about summarizing, we want to think about, first of all, what kind of text do we need to summarize? Our two big ideas in text are going to be informational text and literature. The best way for us to think about organizing text is to really look at how is that text structured. So for informational text, we can decide, is there a sequential structure, time, descriptive, is it a compare and contrast, problem solution, question answer, cause and effect? What type of structure the text has can help us to decide how to best approach the summarization. And then with literature text, typically there's the plot structure that we're going to be looking at. This pattern, of course, is going to be found in most narrative or literacy texts. Next. So why take notes? We did talk about this as not just summarizing, but also taking notes. And this is just some information we thought it was interesting and important to share. If you don't write things down, 42% of the information will be forgotten after 20 minutes, 56% after an hour, 66% after a day, 75% after a week, and 80% after a month. I might also add that research has been done to show that handwriting information down has a much greater impact than typing information. So that has been something else that we've been using with kids as well. And they've done that research mostly at the college level to see how well kids remembered notes that they had taken in class. Next. In looking at the steps for the summarizing strategy, steps for the informational text, we can remember this mnemonic, the TMDS. So step 1, we're going to identify the topic. Step 2, identify the main idea. Step 3, identify important details. And then step 4, we're going to summarize. So what we're going to do next is Gail is actually going to walk you through some examples of how you can go about identifying the topic and the main idea. Then we'll look at identifying the details and summarizing with kids.
This is just a little bit more, the same 4 steps, but now we have some prompts. Some of them are questions until we get down to step 4 that they can use for self-talk, as well as that we can use to ask them as we're trying to get them to complete the 4 steps. So those prompts are also on the cue card in the Google Drive folder so that they can look at them and until it becomes automatic self-talk, they can look at it to prompt themselves, as well as you can use it to ask them questions and give them directions. So let's start with the topic. Step 1, identify the topic. And the topic is kind of a little more general. It's just a word or a few words that tells what a paragraph is about. So we're going to just start at the single paragraph level, and then later we'll move to a multiple paragraph informational text passage. So remember, right now we're talking about informational text. So there are 2 bullets, kind of sub-steps of step 1. There are 2 ways we can identify that topic. One, we can look for repetitions of the same word or words, or maybe for a synonym for the original word that we saw. And that will clue us, if we see the word hikers, 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 the paragraph is probably about hikers. So we'll be looking for repetitions of words in some paragraphs. Another way we can identify the topic, if it's not clear, we might see examples of a certain category. Like if you saw the words ballet slippers, sneakers, and cleats, we would know that the paragraph is probably about shoes. So sometimes you group all the details together into a general category to identify the topic. Sometimes for step 2, the main idea is clearly stated, and other times it's implied. So step 2 is identify the main idea sentence. We really want to know, if it was about hikers, what does it tell me about hikers? If the paragraph is about shoes, what does it tell me about shoes? What is that controlling point or the main point about that topic? Now it's not so general anymore. We're giving a little more information. And there are 2 ways, 2 sub-bullets or 2 sub-steps to identifying the main idea sentence. If it's a stated main idea sentence, we can look back in the text in the first, the second, or the last sentence, and we might actually find a topic sentence, so to speak. Or if it's an implied main idea, then we would need to invent our own main idea sentence. Just a caution, in the standards in grades 5 and below, Sometimes the word main idea is used to talk about the entire passage, not just one paragraph, and other times it could be referring to a single paragraph. Whereas in grade 6 and above, the term central idea is typically used for the entire selection, multiple paragraphs. So when you're using the term main idea, it's advisable that we let the kids know, are we talking about the entire passage or just one paragraph, so there's no question about it. I don't know if anybody uses the Read Naturally or Read Live program. One of the questions asks, what is the main idea? And it's asking about the entire selection in that case. But we want to make sure that we use language that follows the standards. So let's try an activity now. Well, this one actually I'm going to demonstrate for you, so you won't have trouble doing a little look of your own for repeated words. So in order to find the topic, we're going to look for repetitions of a word or words. So as I model it for you, the I do it, we can see the word Emily multiple times. We can see the pronoun she refers to Emily. And we also see the middle school student, which is a term that is representing Emily. So by seeing all those repetitions of words that mean the same thing, we can guess that this paragraph, the topic is Emily. And then for the main idea sentence, we want to look back at the first, the second, or the last sentence to see if we can find a stated main idea sentence. And you can see I have highlighted in red the terms that would represent Emily. And in fact, the young girl is another one. And then as we look back to see, can we find a main idea sentence? We can see that that first sentence is a pretty good main idea sentence. Emily had done many activities to get ready for the play. And we know the name of the play, and she's performing in it. Her big performance in the play, Alice in Wonderland. So we use the first sentence as our main idea sentence. So now it's your turn. Let's look at this paragraph. And as you're looking at it, you can even skim it for our purposes today. Look for repetitions of a word or words and maybe some synonyms. So go ahead and call out or write in the chat, what are some words that you see as repeated words? Meteoroids I see in the chat, good. Any other synonyms for meteoroids? Meteors, good. Some meteoroids are considered meteoroids or meteors when they enter the Earth's atmosphere. Anything else? Good. Falling or shooting stars, excellent. Any others? I think that's a good start. Let's take a look. You can see in red, we even have fireballs. I think you guys got all of them except for that one near the end of the paragraph. So we can guess that this, our top, when we identify the topic, we're going to say this paragraph is about meteoroids. And then we want to go to step 2. We have our topic. What does it tell me about meteoroids? In this case, there is not a main idea sentence that is stated. It's not in the first, the second, or the last paragraph. So we have to come up with our own. Anybody want to try to invent a main idea sentence. What does it tell me or tell us about meteoroids? And you can, rather than making a full sentence, if you want to just type in like a title, we can start with a title before we go to a full sentence, but a little more specific than the general title of meteoroids. When we read most are no bigger than grains of sand, what is that describing? What about meteoroids? And what about the fireball and the trail of brightly glowing the brightly glowing gases? Good. Characteristics of meteoroids. Exactly, Tabitha. Thank you. So we have characteristics, and if we just take a look here. And if we wanted to turn that into a complete sentence, we could say the characteristics of meteoroids make them interesting, or the physical features. It does talk a little bit about the types of meteoroids because it mentions the meteors versus the meteoroids. So meteor is a type of meteoroid. And then fireballs are the brightest meteoroids. So we get into some of the types of meteoroids as well. Good job identifying the main idea. There is a caution when we get kids to make a main idea sentence that sometimes they will just always have the go-to. There are many characteristics of meteoroids. There are many types of meteoroids. You will find many types of meteoroids. So we're going to make that something that we want to revise if they start with a sentence like there are many physical features and types of meteoroids, and kind of revise that and start with the word meteoroids, or start with the physical features and or characteristics of meteoroids make them interesting. So just a little caution, or they'll end up, every main idea sentence will look the same. So now we're going to try a different example, and we're going to do, sometimes there are not repetitions of words to help us to identify the topic. So then we have to group all the details together into one general category, like I mentioned with the shoes, or I forget what my other example was, but we're going to see one right here. So can you identify some specific details or examples of something that are in here, even though the category is not named? So go ahead and type in the chat or unmute and talk. Good. Kara has the category. What were the details? Kara said that the category or the topic is flowers. What are the examples? Good. And now Jeffrey has it into a sentence. Types of flowers remind me of spring, because we are talking about a specific kind of flower, the spring flowers. Good. Thanks, Jessica. We have roses, bleeding hearts. What other kinds of flowers did we have to group together to come up with the label flowers? Our paragraph didn't use the word flowers, but we could group roses, bleeding hearts. What were some others? Good, the tulips and the gladioli. So on this one, whoops, let me go back one. We came up with flowers as the topic. Next, we're going to invent a main idea sentence. And I think We did get one from Jeffrey. Types of flowers remind me of spring. Good, that one works. So we might want to use the word spring in there. Spring brings many types of flowers. I just kind of took the first sentence and substituted different kinds of surprises with many kinds of flowers. But there's not one and only one correct answer for this main idea sentence. Great job, everybody participating. Let's go on to another one. So now we're going to look for examples of a category. So what are the details first, instead of starting with the topic first? Because even though it might be easy for us as adults to come up with the category, the general category, what are the examples in here before we get to the category? What are some of those details? Good. We've got monkeys, sloths, birds, frogs, and snakes. Thanks, Kara. And now, what category can we group all the details into? And this is where we want to, good. Rainforest is a general category, and we kind of want to make sure that the category is that just right topic, where it's not too general, not too specific, but just right. If we said living things in the rainforest or just rainforest, it could lead us to think that plants were going to be in this paragraph, but really it is about the rainforest animals. So we want to get that, not, I think of salsa, not too spicy, not too mild, but the just right salsa, the just right topic, not too general, not too specific, but the just right topic. And then we might have to turn that title into a main idea sentence. We have to invent one, like I think it was Jeff did on the last paragraph. Many different kinds of animals live in the rainforest. Kind of a general main idea topic, but we have our category embedded in the complete sentence. And now Kristen is going to take us into the details, steps 3 and the summarizing step 4.
Okay, so looking at step 3, once we have our main idea, our sentence that we've either found or created, now we're going to identify some of the most important details. So there are a couple different things we have to keep in mind. What are the details that are most important for us to understand that main idea? And we want to look at keep in mind 3 different things. First of all, we need to delete any distracting or unimportant details. Substitute anything that's using a general category. And for this, think about what you did when you were looking at the spring flowers or the animals in the rainforest. So rather than listing everything from a particular category, can you group something? And then the last thing that we're going to look at doing is keeping those essential details that are going to be important to really explain that particular topic. Next. The 4th step will be summarizing. And again, for summarizing, we always want to encourage kids to use their own words as much as possible. This can be a really tough idea for kids. It's so much easier just to write whatever an author has already written, but trying to practice with kids to how do you say the same thing, but putting it in your own words. And also the idea that a summary is really supposed to be in as few sentences as possible. So how can we take this much information and describe it in this many sentences? So to do that, we have to decide which ideas are the most necessary And then how do we take those ideas and combine them into a couple of detailed sentences if possible? And this is something that you can actually work with students on in either a verbal or a written form. Next. So for an example, we're going to look at this paragraph on bears. First of all, looking at details, this particular paragraph talks about all 8 different kinds of bears in the world. And if we're reading through the description of bears, one of the details in particular, that bears are large and stocky, is really a pretty basic detail and probably something that most people know. So for example, when it comes time to selecting details, that would be one that we may delete because it's common knowledge. Next. One of the best ways for students to organize ideas is by using a process of something called 2-column notes, also known as Cornell note-taking system. And in this system, typically you would have your topic on one side of the page and your details on the other side. So for example, if we're thinking about the paragraph that we just looked at, what would you say would be a title for the topic of that paragraph? You can see the details that we've pulled out. What would you put as a topic? We know that our paragraph is about bears. All right, I'm seeing characteristics, so characteristics of bears. So we're describing them.
Good.
Yep, physical characteristics, very good. And that is what we're looking at in this particular paragraph. We're talking about the looks or appearance, physical features, physical characteristics of bears. So therefore, that would be on the left-hand side of your 2-column notes. You can also refer to this as a T-chart. That's yet another name for it. And on the right side, we're going to, just with some little dashes or bullet points, we're going to list those details that we felt were most important from that paragraph. Next.
And I do believe that on the cue card, it has some questions for the topic, not too general, not too, like kids can coach each other, not too general, not too specific, just right. Because if we say characteristics or features, would it be the characteristics of their eating habits or their diet, or characteristics of what? So just remember, the topic can be 1, 2, or 3 words. It doesn't have to be only 1 word.
So in step 4, we're going to look at our characteristics. And now we're going to try to figure out how are we going to combine those characteristics and put them into a sentence, a summarizing sentence. So you can see that we've taken those different descriptors and we've put them into 2 sentences. So we've taken that entire paragraph of multiple sentences and shrunk it into just 2. And we've pulled on those key ideas. And I might add that we've also used transition words and compound sentences in order to do that combination. Now, we've mostly been looking at examples with single paragraphs. So there are going to be times that your students are going to be trying to identify the central idea of an entire passage, multiple paragraphs. And again, this is another example of a time when that T chart or those 2-column notes is really going to be advantageous for organizing the ideas, pulling out those topics of each paragraph and those details. So what we're going to do is kind of just take a quick look. If we were continuing to read this passage on bears, what might this look like if we were taking notes from the passage in this particular manner on the T chart? Next. This is an example of what one of the documents looks like that is in the folder that we showed you earlier. So this is something that you'll be able to use with students. Notice it has the key ideas listed on the left with stars, and then details with either dashes or bullet points on the right. Transition, we even have room in there for transition words. So you can have your topic sentence, and then moving down into, basically we're trying to set kids up for success in the ability to summarize what this passage is that they've been reading. Next. So for the first one, this is just a repeat of what we looked at before. Remember, our first paragraph showed the looks and appearance of bears. And then we would move on to the second paragraph. And this is just kind of quickly to mention again, remember, we're going to delete any information that's too specific or repeated. So looking at this paragraph, we're talking about when bears are born, that they're tiny. Okay, that's great. We don't have to go into specifically how tiny they are. And then that last sentence, it's repeating the fact that mothers have to teach them to avoid danger or teach them how to survive. So those are pieces that we're going to, again, this is something we're going to practice with kids on how to learn what information to strike out. Next. So this is an example of what our T chart might look at like. Please understand, just for sake of room on the Google slides, we have taken out the details from the previous topics. So this one is just looking at the details for the mothers and cubs. Now, if we were going on to the next paragraph, we may have our next paragraph may be about diet. So we're looking at the details that we pulled out of the paragraph about the bear's diet. Then moving on to the next one, the final paragraph may have been about bear survival. And just to point out, in this particular example, we have not only the dashes, but also the bullet points. So we've got some main details and also some supporting details that were important for this particular paragraph.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to narrative text or literature or a story. Usually it's considered fiction, but there could be a nonfiction text that is told in a story format. It's true, but it's told more in a story format in a sequence of events. But usually we're talking about fiction, but we're going to be discussing literature here. And there are 6 components to literature. And remember, if you have questions or comments, we'll have time in just a short while after we finish the narrative text and how to summarize. We'll give you an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. So here we have the 6 components of the plot text structure. Remember, every story has this text structure, and these are the 6 components, and you can see the reference on the slide where this comes from. And Jerry Thompson did have or does have is working with the state of Pennsylvania, with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So this is approved by PDE. We have 6 components of a story, and we'll look at each of these a little more detailed, but we have the beginning. Sometimes in the upper grades, that's called the exposition. And then the middle would be components 2, 3, 4, and 5, a series of events. One of the problems has some, or one of the characters has some kind of problem or a wish that is being thwarted that they can't have come true so easily, or some kind of conflict between some main characters. And then there's always an ending, some kind of a resolution to the problem or conflict. It may not always be that the main character gets his wish and gets his way. So we can either look at this as 6 components, or for younger students, we might just look at the beginning, the middle, ending, and ending 3 parts. So we'll look at the different graphic organizers as well for different grade levels. Here's the T chart, and I'm just going to use my annotation here to make a T. If we get kids to start making their own T charts, they can just start with a capital T. If it were for the informational, they would put the stars on the left and the dashes and dots on the right. However, for this story T chart, the literature, we're going to use the quick sketch and quick notes. So it's almost like a storyboard on the left-hand side, where they get to draw a picture. And notice it is a quick sketch, only about 45 seconds for each of these boxes for them to draw the picture. So it's not an art project where they're going to use colored pencils and spend a long time, only about 45 seconds for each. And then the notes on the right side. Now we only need 1 level of bullets instead of 2 levels of bullets like we had with the informational text, where we had dashes and dots, kind of like lead off details and follow-up details, like Kristen said, the supporting details and maybe those first critical details. Now we just have about 3 bullets for each, and whether it's dashes or dots is not a big issue, but each of those goes with each part, the beginning, the middle, and the ending. For the beginning is where the author reveals the setting and the main characters. So the setting includes not only where the story takes place, especially at the beginning when it starts off, but when it's happening. Is it a certain significant year? Is it afternoon, evening, morning? So the time can be considered part of the setting in addition to the place. And so that would be what we would put. You can see I used, I have the book with me. Let me just show you the book. So you can see I have Stella Luna here, and in the book Stella Luna, we have the characters introduced at the beginning. Well, let's start with the setting. It's taking place in a hot and humid forest, and the 2 main characters are the mother fruit bat and the new baby bat, or bat baby, Stella Luna. And then I tried drawing a picture over here of 2 bats. Notice it is a quick sketch. Don't criticize my artwork. Looks like the wind is blowing in that tree, the way I made it. And maybe I'd want to put 2 trees in there to show that it's a forest and not just 1 tree, or maybe a sun to show that it's hot. And now we have 4 middles instead of just 1 middle on this T chart, or graphic organizer. It's still a 2-column note, but now instead of just a beginning, middle, and an end, we have beginning, middle, 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 ending. So depending on the age level and developmental level of your students, what are they ready for? We can even gradually work up to the 4 middles if you want to have 2 or 3 middles leading up to 4 middles. So what are the middles? The middles would be the the conflict we talked about, some kind of a problem of one of the main characters, the rising action that is showing some tension leading up to the climax of the story. What is the climax? The characters finally confront that problem and many of your questions get answered. So now we have an idea whether the main character is going to succeed or fail at solving the problem in the way that they would like to solve it. And then as the tension is gradually disappearing, we have the falling action with more events and more questions that we have getting answered. So when we think of this little triangle, it kind of takes you up to the climax or the peak, and then we have the falling action on the right side of the triangle. The ending is where there is some kind of a resolution. It may not always be a happy ending. The main character doesn't always get their way. And sometimes there could be a new conflict introduced at the end, but there is always some kind of implied or stated theme, moral, message, lesson to a story in literature. Here's an example of one about the wind and the sun. And you can see the storyboard or the quick sketches on the left. And sometimes 2 dashes are filled out, sometimes 3. And we can see that the theme seems to be that kindness can be more convincing than harshness. So that's a lesson learned, the theme from this one. So we want kids to be able to be aware of what the theme is, and they may need help with that. So now we've gone through both informational text and literature, the stories, how to do the steps. We have 4 steps for informational text and the 6 components with a beginning, a middle, and an ending of literature. And so, Kristen, I'll let you go ahead and take it from here. You're muted. There we go.
It helps if you turn the microphone back on. All right. So we want to give you an opportunity to, first of all, we want to take a look at what is in the participants folder. So, and also give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have, thinking about who your students are, students that you work with, what kind of challenges might you face, what kind of practice, how might you use the idea of the T-chart for summarizing. So what are your thoughts? Let's start off with the difference between how we summarize informational versus narrative text, because there is a significant difference on pieces that we look for. So Gail's pulled up the cue card for summarizing informational text. And again, this is something that that you can use with students. This is something I would use with older students. Probably, Gail, wouldn't you say upper elementary?
I think, yeah, I would say, maybe you could do a modified version of this, like you could white out the bullets and just have the 4 steps on here. If you kind of like the one slide that just had the 1, 2, 3, 4, but with all kids, as we do explicit instruction, we want to make sure to do our, description of the 4 steps, tell them we're working on summarizing today, that advance organizer, and then name the 4 steps, and then do the modeling, the I do it, and then the guided practice. And we'd probably have to do a lot of guided practice, but I think it can apply to some younger students as well. We would just have to change this cue card to be less
That's what I
busy.
meant. Yeah, the cue
Yes.
card itself.
Yes, this cue card would be for older kids. And sometimes what I'll have kids do is highlight which question they like so that they're not having to ask both questions. There are options. So which question do you like to ask yourself? And just pick one or the other. And like I said, you might want to, if you're only working on identify the topic, get rid of the bullets on the other ones, and only have the bullets for step 1 listed there. So like Kristen said, for younger kids, we would want to simplify this cue card, but we can still use the strategy. And that's why when we look at the T-chart, can you think of how you could simplify this T-chart?
Out of curiosity, what grades is everybody working with? All right, middle school, high school. Seventh. All right, so it's looking like we have mostly secondary students on here. Autistic support as well. So even for that, can you think of what are some challenges in particular for students on the autism spectrum, or even for students? I know, I would say with my own students, I know struggled putting information in their own words. All right. Is that something that you struggle with kids? Deciding what information is. Sorry, I'm laughing because I've also worked in autistic support as well. So, and I can completely understand that. Sequencing in order, absolutely. So how do you decide what is important and what isn't? I do think that the one activity in particular is helpful, and this is one I think would be helpful with students, even students on the spectrum, which is the going through and identifying repeating words. And I think focusing on, helping the kids really zero in on that topic through the identification of repeated words can sometimes help to narrow their focus a little bit, so they're not picking everything. I do agree that for some of our kids, it can be a real challenge. If I'm thinking back to the bear example, coming to the conclusion that when we took out bears are, large and stocky as being something that we felt everybody knew, that might be a hard generalization. Maybe doing some type of brainstorming with the group. What do you know about bears? And saying, okay, well, let's see what everybody knows right now. And if there is something in common that everybody knows, is that something we can strike off our list? So maybe if everybody knows that bears are big, okay, well, that's one thing that we can strike off from our details. So even if you're just kind of pulling within that group.
And by identifying what's difficult for students, then we can anticipate those confusions and make sure that as we're explicitly teaching, we set them up for success. So you have lots of good ideas in the chat. deciding what information is important. They just want to highlight everything
Right.
to show that it's all important. There's a sea of yellow, or the sequence. Or Dawn, you make a good point about summarizing is not retelling. We don't want every detail and every event in a story. Retelling would be, tell me everything you can think of what happened in that story, every event. When my dad would tell a story at 100 years old or 101, he had a hard time shrinking it down. And so he would tend to do more of a retelling rather than summarizing, because he did like to talk. So that shrinking it is very difficult. And on this one, if you have, I think sometimes the details can be difficult. So some of these cues, whether it's self-talk or these questions above the details, do you find that could be helpful? Maybe to get them to do those follow-up supporting details. And this is in the scaffolds of support section of accelerated learning. And as you think of our system of scaffolded supports, what do we want to do with these scaffolds of supports once we've introduced them? What is our ultimate goal with scaffolded supports? Very good, Tabitha, fading them. We want it student independence. Great, slowly removing them, not suddenly removing them, because eventually we want them to create their own T-chart and not have to have a template for one. We want them to do their own self-talk with these questions, whether it's questions on the cue card or questions on the T-chart. We want them to start asking themselves and not either seeing it in writing or us having to do the questioning. You guys are right on the ball with it. All right, let's take a look at the let's look at the literature. So again, if we wanted to, as Kristen said about simplifying for the younger kids, how could we simplify this for a younger student or for a struggling learner, so it's not too much information on a page? And
I can check. I might even have some simpler versions, though I think most of our people are working with secondary.
Right.
But a graphic organizer of it sometimes helps visually for some of our kids, especially on the spectrum, who are much more visual in their representation.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing it maybe in that hill and the rising climax may also be something that would be helpful.
I can show you which slides could actually be a simpler version. Let me go this way because it's somehow not letting me.
And I realize also, Gail, I just want to mention we are almost out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Gail and I would be more than happy to stay on and answer any additional questions. I do want to acknowledge that if you need to leave, that is perfectly fine. We want to thank you so much for attending this afternoon and remind you that you do need to complete that evaluation on Frontline in order to get credit for this afternoon session.
And just before you sign out, if you can put your name and district again in the chat just as a sign off, that would be great if you can do that real quickly. Yeah. Thanks so much for your participation. You all had great ideas. I am going to stop the recording.
All right, so Don says the climax is hard for kids.